What is going on, everybody? Moridagna here, back with another Rimworld video. Today we're doing something quite a bit different, and we're going to be doing 100 days as Illithids from the Forgotten Realm. If you do like this video, then please hit the like and subscribe, as I'd really like to hit 300 subscribers by the end of this year. As you might have guessed, we are starting as the stranded Illithid from the Xenotype Illithid mod. The next thing for us to do was to find a wonderful starting location which would be populated by lots of people around us, hopefully hostile. As you know, Illithids, or if you're unfamiliar with Illithids, they love having hostiles as they want to create more of themselves with tadpoles. I didn't particularly want to start with a water in the area, as I didn't want it to cut into the mountain area that we have, and you will see why very shortly with the ideology. So we're picking here in the temperate forest with no caves, and it's mountainous. Here we are, starting with two colonists, Zephyr and Nicole. So Zephyr Darkmind is our main character in the story. He's a bit of a psychopath, and he is very, very intelligent. He has also got some construction skill and an old gunshot wound, but the main thing is he is an intellectual. With this inner power that he has gained, he has taken into the ability to manipulate people, time, and undead from Archon, Chronopath, and Necropath. If you're wondering, these abilities come from the Psycast Extended mod. Now within the scenario, we start with our quote-unquote thrall, which is Nicole Bridges. However, it seems in further inspection, it's actually Zephyr's sister. But we are a shaft of augmentation, which is a transhumanist, tunneling darkness ideologian. When Zephyr and Nicole first landed on this godforsaken planet, he instantly went to grab his staff. Nicole, unfortunately, is incapable of violence, so that will come into play later down the line, but yeah, it's not the greatest. So what we're doing is we're instantly going to make ourselves a little home, as our colonists do not like the light. After Zephyr and Nicole had searched around the area, they realized that they need to secure this area, otherwise they would not be surviving very long in this place. And Zephyr has plans, very, very big plans to create an army of his own kind. A little bit more on Nicole. As you know, she is incapable of violence, but she, from the Rimworld of Magic mod, she is a technomancer. Use balls of tech and magic combined in order to enhance their abilities to manipulate. So as you imagined with Tunneler, we are very, very required to eat fungus. They prefer to eat fungus, and that is the first thing that we're going to start out creating. But of course, if you know fungus, then you need to make sure that it has no aspect of light, otherwise it is destroyed. Which is perfect, really, because our colonists really do not like light. So having darkness where our crops are going to be for our continuous supply of food is going to be perfect to fit this colony. Of course, we are also transhumanist, which means that we can use the nutrient paste. So that is one of the goals to get to. If you remember, I spoke about Zephyr being able to manipulate time itself. Interestingly enough, manipulating time has its drawbacks. However, due to Zephyr being ageless, preemptive aging of time magic will not actually affect him. This is incredibly powerful when mixed with this ability, where he is able to manipulate time on plants. Zephyr, on top of having the Psi link, he is also a Psi caster, meaning that he can use the force of his mind, dish out some serious damage, or defend himself within combat. Due to food being the priority, poor Zephyr was sleeping on the ground this night. It wasn't too long until Nicole had mined her way to create our first little bedrooms that are going to be the most disgusting things in the world right now, but there's still a roof over, well, a mountain overhead. Nicole, however, really was not that happy. They really needed some form of recreation around here, but we couldn't exactly put it outside in the light, as they would get even more annoyed and blinded by the light. Finally, the bedrooms were almost ready. They only needed one more bed and a few doors for them to possibly be remotely comfortable to living here. Of which, that was all fine and dandy, but we still had nowhere to eat, the floors were disgusting, and we had nowhere to store our potential food when it comes in. Nicole had a lot of work to do. She needed to create a dining room and a kitchen for us to prepare meals so we wouldn't all go insane. Speaking of insanity, Zephyr got to sleep in his own bed tonight. All plans were being made. We had sorted out where we wanted our dining room. Now it was just time to plan out the kitchen. Zephyr, however, had much darker plans. He had been spoken to by his master himself, forcing him to write an incredibly dark book, a book of the occult. You would have thought that Zephyr would have been happy and honoured to hear the voice of his almighty master. However, this was pushing him closer and closer to the edge. Zephyr must have felt some form of honour, however, as he instantly decided he wanted to create a cult within the colony. Zephyr said to Nicole that she should stop mining into our kitchen as food is not our priority. He needed somewhere to progress his plans to create this Illithid army, in order to progress to his despicable plans of ruling this Rimworld. The mere thought of this evolved his mind, increasing his psionic capabilities. Zephyr sat in meditation, speaking with his master, as Nicole was forced to do all the dirty work to create what could only be known as an evil laboratory. It took nearly a full day of Nicole tunneling to eventually create an area where Zephyr could begin progressing the colony's dark technologies. So many plans, yet so little time. Our colonists had forgotten that they had left their most vital possessions outside in the rain, deteriorating. It wasn't long until Zephyr finally had a place for him to work out his plans. It was time to begin his first research assignment. First of his priorities would to be defend the colony. Shortly after, it was time for Zephyr to name the homestead and faction. He decided upon Brain Base and Megamind. Our priorities had shifted. It was time for Nicole to begin our kitchen as food was slowly depleting. With all this work, Nicole had synced more with her Technobot, allowing her to manipulate and mine much faster. Progression of the colony was moving forward, however, their sanity was slowly dwindling due to the state of their ugly bedrooms. In order to maintain the rate at which the colony was progressing, Zephyr, while asleep, was thinking about how he was going to pan out each bedroom, both Nicole's and himself, fully preventing the deterioration of their mental health to no return. Zephyr had a dream that night. Dreamt about colonists who were massively advanced. If only his own colony was that advanced. He thought about how he could potentially gain such advancements and steal what was only to be his, although he was murdered in this dream. Thankfully, that was only a dream, so it was time for the continuation of progress within the colony. He still was yet to increase the bedrooms, however, before he could, he went into a mental break. He was scared of his hideous room. It must be some form of germaphobe, as all of this mess around, he couldn't cope. After Zephyr finally brought enough courage, he was able to start harvesting some lovely fungus for the colony, yet we still had nowhere to store it. To make himself feel a little bit better, as well as Nicole, he began putting in some plans on the bedroom that he had dreamt about, which Nicole swiftly got to work on, hopefully increasing the value of the room, yet they were still very awful. Nicole had been working day in and day out, finally having enough room to create an area for us to eat. However, just as she was finishing creating our table, the Sudthen tribe decided that they wanted to try and raid us. They were only armed with mere bows and a club. Shouldn't fare too well against Zephyr's psionic abilities and ability to manipulate the mind. Zephyr was so confident in this fact that he continued researching and Nicole continued on with the food storage. However, it wasn't too long until they decided to try and breach the doors. Zephyr was swift to act. He began moving towards the door to hopefully blast as soon as he walked through. He wished he had time to progress in the Illithid pod. However, soon they broke through. It was time to blast with a psionic ability towards them, which didn't seem to do much against the raider, causing measly damage to the left shoulder and ear. However, that wasn't enough to make them unconscious. He quickly went in for another strike, zooming towards the enemy. He was capable in super speed with his psionic abilities, which in turn made the raider fall. Using his telepathy, he figured out what this raider was good for and whether he could be used within the colony. So he set up a sleeping spot, or appointed one, and then got Nicole to create an area where they could keep the slaves. Then threw the injured raider over his shoulder and began carrying them to the spot where they were going to slowly manipulate them until he eventually joined. The raider had sustained some terrible injuries from Zephyr's psionic abilities, so Nicole was sent to slowly but surely mend up this raider. However, there was another raider on the way, this one wearing a deer skull mask and wielding a knife and a club, which could be potentially a dangerous target for our Zephyr. However, Zephyr, with quick haste, instantly started slashing with super speed towards this enemy, hopefully trying to knock it down before he actually had a chance to stab. The enemy also did not prove to be much of a challenge against Zephyr, knocking her unconscious without even sustaining a blow to himself. This one was incredibly strong with animal use, as well as had a high shooting capability, which would be another great slave if we are able to break their will so they would actually work for us in the future. Zephyr, acting upon it swiftly, again began to try and carry them off. However, another raider appeared, one that was out of sight when they first did the original scout. This one had also some magical abilities, a whirlwind ability, a brute of sorts. Zephyr quickly tried to send a psionic blast towards, however, the raider charged at him. We were now in one-to-one combat. There was only one thing for Zephyr to do, was to try and psionically dash away so he didn't get beaten up, as he wasn't the greatest in hand-to-hand combat. This caused enough damage to the raider that he decided to flee. So hopefully we will be able to actually capture him and capture the others. He ended up turning back around as he knew that Zephyr was on his tail. This caused another hand-to-hand combat, which we know that Zephyr was not incredibly strong in this matter. However, slowly but surely, what seemed like a fight that lasted for the ages, decided to throw another psionic blast towards the target, hopefully knocking them unconscious this time. However, the blast, even though it did some reasonable damage, did not. This warrior brute was just unyielding. He decided that the only thing left was to rot away the very core of this raider. However, this would render him useless, probably ending up within the raider's death. However, it was his only choice, and a final straw, he used Paralysis Pulse, which rendered him and the raider unconscious for 24 hours. Zephyr's sister Nicole swiftly acted to bring Zephyr back to existence, patched up his wounds in his bed, and then eventually went out to gain the rest of them. However, what we didn't notice upon the sidelines was another raider, the raider that was once downed, decided to try and run off with the Illithid staff, the only weapon that increased Zephyr's powers and the ability to manipulate the mind itself. This would be a truly devastating blow to the colony should this raider be able to leave with such a powerful artifact. Nicole did not notice that this was happening, so instead spent the time to patch up these prisoners, as hopefully we would have some slaves to increase the will of our colonists. After patching up the prisoners, she noticed that the other raider had actually collapsed, and that was when she noticed this was a prisoner who needed to be executed. She had committed the worst crime for our colony. She had tried to steal the artifact which allowed Zephyr to control everything that he needed for his plans. However, shortly after, one of the prisoners had decided to go berserk, which means that they were only going to stop at one thing, a death of one of our colonists. He was attempting to break through the door with such passion, trying to eventually reach us, and soon the door would not hold. He had made it through the first door. Now he was banging at the door of Nicole, who was the one who was incapable of violence, and the one who actually patched up his wounds, preventing him from bleeding out there and then. Maybe she should have just left him there to rot. Maybe she should have left him there to bleed out. Even though she was incapable of violence, she was not incapable of defending herself, which is just enough to hopefully prolong this fight for Zephyr to awaken from the paralytic abrasion, hopefully to defend the colony. Nicole was getting beaten heavily, so she used her kinetic shield, attempting to negate some of these incoming blows, which hopefully would be enough to prolong this so Zephyr would awaken. Hopefully. So Nicole went back to sleep, and fortunately the door shut, which was just enough time for Zephyr to awaken from his paralytic abrasion, just enough time to beat the living daylight out of this aggressive prisoner. Hopefully he was enough. He was able to use a psionic ability which shattered out pulses of energy, which did not seem to cause too much lethal harm. However, it did have enough to knock him unconscious. Due to being beaten up by a random stranger that they had recently captured, Nicole had started wandering around in a psychotic state. The final straw was the fact that due to healing all of these prisoners, these despicable, ungrateful prisoners, she did not have chance to fulfill her recreation. Zephyr took swift action to try and attempt to get Nicole out of this mood, which fortunately, due to him being her brother, he was able to manage to get her out of this state. The situation of the colony's dwindling food supply was ever growing. This caused Nicole to be forced to create a stove for the colony to hopefully help this out. In the meantime, Zephyr was able to research one of the first things he needed, smithing. Nicole was busy creating a mummy inside of the prisoner's hut, as this one had sustained so many injuries. After all these things going on, Zephyr decided he wanted to ruin all of his plans, and Nicole was unable to even try and attempt him to get out of this mood. So Zephyr destroyed the one item that was needed for the progression of the colony, all of the components. Though this was a massive backtrack, Nicole was able to create the stove for the colony. However, they did want to move slowly towards nutrient paste to be able to have infinite food supply, but this was now impossible due to the fact that Zephyr went into a rage, causing no components, means no nutrient paste at all. Plans had been created to create an area for where we wanted power within the colony before we could move to the greater power supplies of geothermal. And in the meantime, a mega sloth wandered in and ate some of our only food, which caused us to get even more hungry. So we swiftly got to action in creating a door to prevent this happening again. Now we had the potential to eat at a table. Nicole was prioritized to create the chairs so we could no longer complain about having no area to eat our food. Next plans to be created were the ones that were most important. These were the areas that we were going to use to finally start growing some of our tadpoles to implant into the minds of these prisoners that we have captured. Another thing that was of vital importance was to improve the state of our bedrooms, as that was what was causing the colonists to dwindle in sanity, which Nicole swiftly got to action, even while Zephyr was asleep. Hopefully, he would wake up to be happier once it was done. As we know, a mega sloth decided to eat some of our only food supply, so Zephyr had no other choice but to use some of his psi potential to be able to create more crops for us to harvest. Fungus, even though not fully grown, was quickly set to harvest. To improve the bedrooms even more, we needed hex-like tiles. After planning the new tiles, Zephyr ate a food-poisoned meal, which is due to his own stupidity of destroying the components, as nutrient paste is safe. Shortly after, we got visited by some wandering traders, which Zephyr was sent out to hopefully go and find us something interesting to gain. As he was reaching the trader, one of the putrid prisoners had developed some lung rot from being too close to the body. However, we did not feel we wanted to save them, so set them to execute the prisoners. Due to Zephyr having some problems with food poisoning, he was unable to gain the greatest deal, even though his social skill was pretty high. He bought all the gold from there, and they even left us a gift of a gas mask and something else. Zephyr had now reached level 7 within the psionic casting, hopefully giving us a greater chance against future raiders. In the meantime, a flash storm happened. Reasonably worrying due to the fact that most of our front base was made out of wood. Another prisoner had also gained some lung rot, but due to the fact of these being such basically a-holes, we decided that this one was also going to be executed, so we executed both prisoners. This wasn't all lost, however, as we could now set the prisoners to have their skulls extracted, allowing us to gain some skull spikes that our colonists would like. Coal was set out to create a better area for our kitchen to prevent the chance of food poisoning, and an area to set up for depositing the corpses, the rotting corpses, so that any future raiders would be traipsing through hundreds of bodies in the future. We then set out to create a nutrient paste dispenser area, as this would eventually allow us to prevent any form of food poisoning happening in the future. As though Zephyr's dream had become reality, a wandering colonist from another faction had wandered in. This one was equipped with some heavy tech, so it was best we left her alone. Instead, we focused our efforts on creating a freezer so our food would not spoil. Shortly after, while Nicole was running errands, a warg decided to try and hunt her, so Zephyr had no choice but to try and put this warg down. It pinned Nicole, so Zephyr decided he wanted to use life rot to rot it from the inside out. This time, the warg now started to chase Zephyr. Zephyr was trying to figure out what he could potentially do in this matter. He tried to use fear. The fear just did not do much, so he went to melee attack it, even though he is probably the worst melee attacker in the colony, even though Nicole cannot be capable of violence. It was only one more straw to use Psionic Blast.
Brutality.
Psionic Blast completely obliterated the warg, rendering the colony finally safe again. Shortly after, gunsmithing had been researched. On top of that, an issue with the nutrient paste dispenser had finally been solved, so food was available within the colony. Within the same day, a herd of Etienne squigs decided to try and fight the colony. We used one of our new abilities, Psionic Storm, which kind of missed everything, but then we beat them to death with a staff. We then opened up the plans, and a herd of guinea pigs decided to try and attack us, which at the same time, some impids from the Barky Forest and the Misc actually decided to try and attack. And this is where it gets interesting. The guinea pigs started to savage the raiders, which I thought would have no chance against the raiders. However, the raider takes a shot from his own friend and ends up going down and being eaten alive. He's already bleeding. He's going to die in 4 hours, but then he gets hit by an arrow as well, and everything goes badly after that. As you can see, gets cut by an arrow and he's about to die, bleeding to death, which leaves us with only one impid remaining and a huge wildfire that has started. And we still haven't replaced our wood walls with steel. So that may be a problem, but first we needed to sort out the raiders, and this is where we get a new prisoner. Instead of doing the smart thing and dealing with this immense fire that had started, we just decided to take our prisoner to the prisoner cell and hopefully break their will enough to get them to become our slave, which we wanted them due to the fact they had decent melee, decent medical, and they could just overall be useful. And finally, the area where we could start creating some tadpoles had started. Unfortunately, however, the prisoner decided to go berserk, and we attempted to just keep fixing the door, but it ended up getting incredibly tedious slowly down the line. So we sent Zephyr in, who pretty much one-tapped these Devzon, or however you pronounce that name, and we actually destroyed her left index finger, which I'm sure she won't mind. She won't need it that much. She'll just be a little bit less efficient with a weapon. And it turns out we didn't fix the problem, we just powered up the nutrient paste. So now it was time to actually kit up the paste wires, or the pipes, and then we started working on making a little kill box, or an area where the raiders were actually going to be herded into, so we could finally have a better chance for stronger raids. Due to Devzon being kind of weak-willed, we finally managed, after saying she has no future, well, Zephyr said she has no future, she was finally brought into the colony as a slave, which Zephyr decided to turn her into a thrall so she would do much more of our bidding without having to worry about trying to consistently attempt to suppress her. But a little bit of a side note, the mod doesn't work too well with this. It does still occur, so it's kind of annoying. But however, we assigned her instantly to do most of the cleaning and most of the hauling so that our other colonists could do the better chores, such as research, mining, and construction. Which, the moment that Devzon had actually been patched up, she instantly got to work cleaning up Zephyr's puke, cleaning up all of the dirt around the areas, and hopefully making our home a little bit more homely, and eventually we can start getting it to look pretty. But we set her off to haul pretty much everything in the area because we didn't want to do it. Something I didn't mention is we actually decided to try and capture a wild woman, which didn't really go too well because she then ended up not really being able to do anything. We checked her and we couldn't actually enslave her or anything, so she just went on a rampage, picked up some clubs, and this is where the game kind of went a little bit strange. If you watch carefully, she's picking up a weapon, dropping it, picking up a weapon, dropping it, picking up a weapon, dropping it. I have no idea why this occurred, but it kind of made life a lot easier because we could just live rot her, and then she would eventually just fall over and not want to live, and we could just execute her. So that was a failure of succession. Unfortunately, we couldn't actually make her do anything. Finally, we gained, instead of multiple raids, we gained an actual trader, which we bought a reinforced barrel. We sold a load of magicite, and we also bought a few components because, as you remember, Zephyr was a pain in the bum and decided to completely destroy all of them. We had finally completed the research to actually create gun turrets, which made us need a hell of a lot more steel, and we needed to start researching on gunpowder, which made us need an actual area to set that up, so we quickly got to that. And Randy gave us another trader, which bought a pump shotgun so we could actually have some more defense. However, maybe it wasn't the best idea to put it on a slave. Shortly after, Desvron actually decided to go a little bit insane and try and rebuke, which fortunately Zephyr can run at super speed with psionic abilities, so he slapped her up before she could even get a shot off, which was very fortunate because one shot to the head with that was bye-bye Zephyr. So we just picked it up so nobody could actually have that, and we started going on to a killing spree to get some more food or weather because it was starting to head towards winter. And in the meantime, we also noticed there was a Carnotaur, so stay well away from that. Even though we had the gun turrets researched, they still hadn't set up a capable defense, so this was going to be difficult. We had a load of wasters from the pollution team following the Legion, but the Carnotaur decided not to do anything. We also have in the background managed to make a bone path everywhere to make the place a little bit more homely. Well, homely to the Illithids. The actual kill box area, or the area where they were going, was finally open with no turrets, however, but we wondered why they were going off into the air and not going down. It was because they killed our beloved squirrel, so we wanted to execute pretty much all of them here. They did have a fair few people, but most of them were just melee, so hopefully Devron, even though I said I didn't want to give it her again, we needed a second person in this, because with Zephyr only wielding the staff to increase his psionic abilities, it was kind of a necessity, or a necessary evil, should you say. He got a beautiful psionic blast off, and it was time to hopefully kill the rest of them, but they were getting a little bit close. Now, Zephyr really didn't do that much other than knock one out, and Devzon was actually getting butchered, but fortunately pump shotguns are amazing in Combat Extended, so we quickly managed to get rid of most of them, and it was only one remaining with a revolver, which it was time to try and shoot with the pump shotgun, which he goes down without really much hassle. Gets a headshot straight away, and he's going to bleed to death and instantly die, unfortunately. A weird pig thing actually managed to start running away. It's called Oinker, or Oink he's called, which is a very fitting name. We didn't actually manage to get him, but here we found Gator. Gator is an amazing shooter and melee, which unfortunately, due to the mod not working too well, kind of isn't the greatest, but he was still better than none, and most of the others were dying within a few moments, so we patched him up with no medicine, and we attempted to enslave him, as enslaving him would be another fitting aspect. Of course, within a few seconds, due to the cramped environment and ugly environment, he went berserk, but we actually still managed to put him down because he doesn't have any weapons anymore, and we are now trying to break his will. He is unwavering loyalty, so we couldn't recruit him. And it was now time for a new research. So we started in non-lethal turrets to hopefully have a better prisoner area for when we're going to implant loads of tadpoles into different prisoners that decide to show up as raiders. Sometime later, we managed to actually break his will and instantly turned him into a thrall, which reduces his learning factor, or it improves the submission. Here we're showing the Illithid pod. Nicole gained an expertise, which we put into tunneling, but the reason why I showed the Illithid pod is it costs 400 steel, so we're getting rid of 9 48s, because for some reason the mod also doesn't have a way to build it, which is a bit bizarre, even though it's got the cost. So we just destroyed all that steel, and it eventually became winter. This is where Zephyr's true power shines. He needed a little bit more psi focus to be able to do this, but winter is by far my most hated season because I normally underprepare massively. We also gained a quest to look after some colonists called Mitch, which Mitch has paralytic abrasion, so we don't really need to keep him that happy, but it was finally time to show Zephyr's true power. Time skip. This ability is incredible as it allows us to completely skip winter. Winter is something, as a Rimworld player, I always underprepare for winter. Now, having the ability to completely skip this season is amazing. However, I do think it's kind of overpowered at the moment. It does need a little bit more of a drawback. For example, the Psychic Coma is only 10 hours, which could be increased quite a lot. We were then notified that there is signals of Mechanoid activity, which sent shivers down my spine as I really did not want to deal with Mechanoids. We didn't even have turrets yet, let alone mortars. And a few raccoons decided that they wanted to attack us, so we sent Devzon straight there with her pump shotgun and let her kill them one by one as they were coming through the area that we'd set up for defense, which wasn't the most difficult, so Randy was being nice to us, even though he warned us. Again, we're destroying some more steel, which allowed us to make another Illithid pod. I have actually messaged the mod creators because I am a programmer, so hopefully I might get access to this to be able to potentially allow us to create Illithid pods. And sometime later we gained another trader, which yet again, Every single time we've had a trader, Zephyr has had some form of health problems, which we sold a load of our meat and asked for 10 components in return, and Zephyr had finally leveled up again, hopefully making him more powerful. With Gator, I forgot that he was a waster, so we actually gave him access to using Flake every day. Eventually we will turn this into every 6 days, just because every day we don't even have the way to produce it. And we'd completely forgotten about Mitch, so that was kind of a problem. He almost died of malnutrition. Progress was being made within the tadpole and prisoner area. We hadn't yet created the turrets to allow us, but we still needed to learn geothermal energy. It was time to make a area of a warehouse so we could actually get some places to store all of our loot from the incoming raiders that were going to happen in the future, as we really didn't have the greatest storage area at the minute. Once this was complete, we actually also had finally researched the one thing that we needed for the colony, which was geothermal energy. So we got straight to work on that, which would bring in some massive amount of energy, so we were actually able to prepare defenses a lot easier. Of course, with the colony not enjoying the light, we needed to have a wall around it and a roofing, so we were able to go there without causing distress to the colonists, and Nicole instantly got to work on all of these things and finally finished our geothermal energy. Shortly after, Nicole actually created a masterwork within the storage area, which is ever so helpful. Thank you, Nicole. It's probably the least helpful thing that she's created in terms of masterwork. There was no need for that, because we're not really going to be there too often, apart from raiders and just storing random items around. That being said, we did actually prepare the order for creating some flooring in there, as we wanted everybody to be able to move swiftly. And around that time, our Zephyr actually gained a expertise point, so we put him into researching so he could actually get the colony's dark plans straight on their way as fast as possible, which increases his research speed as he levels up. Sometime later, we did actually end up completing all the flooring for the storage room, and it was time to expand out a little bit, as we wanted to create some form of mine shaft as well as a hospital. We also had some cows decide to come in, which was helpful, but we didn't really have anywhere to place them, which wasn't actually that helpful in the end, and they instantly got to mating, which is interesting. We then realized that we had given the Gator, who is our waster, everyday flake, which wasn't great because we didn't have much in supply, so we put him on 6 days, as well as we started creating a rec room for them all, as morale in the colony wasn't really the greatest. Randy struck again this time. He gave us something that was both helpful and not the greatest. So Nicole gained sensory Mechanoids, which gives her extra manipulation, but she goes to sleep a lot more often, feels a lot more pain, and so forth. So she's now one of the fastest, by far the fastest miner and builder in the colony. However, she isn't really going to be very happy, and now it was time to start thinking about possibly having some agriculture, as well as we did want to start wiring downwards. We did need to expand all the way down to where our kill zone was, as otherwise we would have no defenses. Around the same time, it was time to deliver Mitch, who was our sleeping paralytic abrasier, who finished that quest, and we gained a perfect amount of gold, 75. So we were now able to make a throne. Unfortunately, however, we did gain the throne, but we later realized that we can't use it until we have some form of title. We did then end up creating a room for the two lovers, the two thrall lovers, which is a bit strange, but we also got to work on advanced turrets. And the event that we wanted in our last series was Orcoid Fungus, which spawned here for some reason, even though we're not an orc colony, which is very strange. Once we had created the rec room, we set our owners, but here we found a problem. Devzon actually forbids sleeping together without marriage, which was kind of pointless, so we had to make her a secondary bed, which could have been better planned had I have checked the colony. And we finally had our first tadpole, which means we could move the Illithid pod a little bit further up, as the Illithid pod was pretty awkward positioned. So it was time to start thinking about our prisoner room a little bit more, possibly making some non-lethal turrets. We also had unlocked sterile materials so we could get work on the hospital soon and be able to increase our morale with some transhumanism modification. Scared me. Unfortunately, it didn't catch the sound. We actually got the war sound on the Rimworld, which unfortunately I didn't capture on the video, but we are being raided by 3 orcs, which is kind of okay. The only thing that I was worried about was the big guy, because they have some serious armor, but they got to the turrets that we just set up, thankfully, as otherwise it would be a bit of a struggle, and the first orc was put down without any hassle, and now it was just time to finish the 2 other orcs. So we brought Zephyr over, and we hoped that he would be able to deal with them just alone. Nicole, for some reason, was on a suicide mission and decided to run towards the area where the raiders were coming in. However, she didn't actually pop her head round, as she would have got obliterated by that massive gun that this Rekazuggaras was holding. So, fortunately she didn't, and it was time to finish them off, even though they have been beaten up. They just weren't actually ready to die, so we just shot a psionic blast towards them with Zephyr, and he did end up taking a few shots, which was not good. Hopefully he survives, but he was dying in 2 hours, so fortunately Nicole was in the area, so we will bring Nicole instantly over. Oh no, she's gone. Yep, she's working on the hospital, thankfully. So Zephyr needs to be tended without medicine, because otherwise if she tries to find medicine, he is a goner. Still had orcs pouring in, raining bullets towards Zephyr. Fortunately he was behind a wall, and it was time to patch him up mid-combat, because otherwise there was no more leader and there was no more Illithid in our colony. Although we do have Tadpole, so it wouldn't have been too bad, but it would have been pretty bad, because he is a very powerful Psycaster. And it was time to use the next psionic blast towards the enemies, and this was the final blow. Now the colony had access to a brand new weapon type of the Big Shooter, which is a incredibly powerful orc weapon, which only requires meh ammo, so it requires auto rounds, which aren't exactly the most difficult to come by, and we already had the loading station set up. And a little bit of another randy situation was they gave us a Boomerlope, which was instantly sorted. And now it was time for my all-time fear of creating a mountain base. We were getting invaded. Well, we had an infestation starting. So it was only 2, but on one of the playthroughs before I started YouTube, I got obliterated. But we have some mega spiders, 3 mega spiders, and a few mini spiders, or whatever they're called. And it was time to just completely try and obliterate them. Fortunately, we did have this new weapon, which was great. And as you can see, the new weapon absolutely melts these bugs, which killing the first one caused the rest of them to come in, and it was time to stand our ground and defend our home, our mountain home. With them charging so fast, we decided to move round the corner, as we did not want to get pinned by them, as they do deal a significant bite, and we were just completely tearing them down with this new weapon, which has an insane amount of ammo. And it wasn't exactly the most difficult, which I was worried this may have been the end of the colony. So now that everything had been sorted, we just need to send everybody over to go and beat the hell out of the hives. And we didn't realize that there was also a final bug. So everybody who was in front of Gator decided, Gator thought that it was a straight line of fire and pretty much almost killed everybody, which wasn't the greatest. He literally shot every single person in the colony, causing them to be near to bleeding out. But Zephyr, using his psionic blast again, shot the final beam towards the new Mega Scarab, and that knocked it completely unconscious. Now it was just time to clean up the mess and clean up the hives to hopefully get everybody happy again, as I'm sure they won't be happy with the complete mess of purely bug blood as well as Zephyr blood and human blood, Waster blood is not actually there because the only Waster we have is our Gator, who decided he wanted to go on a killing spree, not only for bugs, but for our colonists too. So we needed to calm Nicole, because Nicole decided to go on the worst timed mental break in the existence of Rimworld. So Gator got a little bit impatient, brought himself some medicine, and then dropped it on the floor right in front of Nicole. Unfortunately, however, Zephyr couldn't bring Nicole out of the mood, so he was the one he still had decent medical, just not as proficient in medical as the Nicole is, and he tended to Gator by himself, which Gator was going to die if he wasn't being tended, as he got a nasty bite by a Mega Scarab, and we had Devron taking out the hives, which was the final aspect of Randy's invasion. The only thing to do now was just to patch up the rest of them, and then start on cleaning the insane mess we had. As the final hive was about to go, for some reason she decided she wanted to shoot it when she could just melee it. However, it was better than having the hive staying existing forever. There we go, a mood boost for the final slaughter of the hives, and a slaver came by who wanted to take Gator and Devs on, and even though we're completely immoral and incredibly full of warcraft, we wanted to keep them together, so unaccepted it. However, the moment we did, they decided to break up. Another trader came by, and it was time to sell a load of our meat and some other things towards the traders, as well as our cows, because we honestly did not feel like we needed them, because we had nowhere to store them and we didn't want to keep consistently making our colonists unhappy tending to them. And we bought a load of Nutramine, which allowed us to possibly make some more flake for Gator to keep him happy. And we also saw a kitchen bot, which was 14,000. 14,000! So we're a little bit out of reach of that with our 274 silver. But that reminded me, we did have down to the side a load of unclaimed hauler base stations, which could be potentially helpful for the colony. So we went down there and started placing them in our base. It was around this time that we realized that Zephyr had enthralled his sister, so it was time to make her a better being. It was time to make her become an Illithid, as I think that was deserving considering she is the sister of Zephyr. We'd also gained all of our hauler bots, which are tier 1, so they're not the greatest, but they are better than nothing because we're able to now move around with our items a lot easier. There was also a colonist who fell from the sky, so we instantly started setting up on a prisoner table to start collecting some prisoners for the colony. Just as that was happening, another raid from more orcs came, but this one caught my interest. There was a necromancer. Now, necromancers can raise the dead permanently so long as they have the mana to sustain them. So that was definitely a colonist that we really wanted. The orcs weren't too heavily armed either. They mostly just had melee weapons, and we had a even better kill box area. So we had barbed wire where they could barely cross, a load of traps, which unfortunately we don't really have the traps able to move and, well, to be repaired that easy. But as you can see, the orcs have skeletons which are taking a buttload of the bullets, which is very unfortunate, but they also go down and it causes them to slightly flee or at least run for cover. Lots and lots of green blood being sprayed all over the floor because we now have 5 new turrets, as well as Devzon actually waiting in the corner and Gator spraying with the orcs' own weaponry. A lot of the turrets actually ran out of ammo fairly quickly, which, if I had remembered to activate the holobots properly, they would start to be refilled by the holobots, so we did not have to get in the line of fire. It was now time for Devzon to try and finish them off. Unfortunately, we haven't got any non-lethal weapons yet, which would be awesome. In the future, I possibly would think about in the next episode, if we create one, to have non-lethals here as well, so we can actually take them down and have lots more slaves. We needed Nicole, since she is incapable of medicine, incapable of violence, to go and grab some medicine ready to start healing some of these slaves that we're going to be gaining. Obviously, the main priority would be to collect this new necromancer, which Zephyr saw a possibility of so much power in the colony that he even ran out and got hit by the bow multiple times, well, shot by the bow. And Devzon actually was sent out to finally put an end to this bow orc, which was not too difficult considering it was a shotgun against a bow at close range, which was really, really not the fight you would ever want to take. After all of the fighting, it was finally time to enslave our new grot, which is our biggest grot, which he's also got a prosthetic hand, which is great, as we would be able to turn him into a transhumanist in the Ideologian, and he would be happier. So there's a load of bullet wounds, and finally a trader. Randy is being nice to us. We sold all of our insect jelly and gained a huge profit. And then we bought some advanced components, and we sold some more magicite, and bought even more advanced components and some components. And our little Holobot was getting to work with those. One thing I wanted to test out was what would happen if I gave a tadpole to a orc. Would it work? Because there may be a mod conflict, but for the order of science, we decided to try and make it. The biggest grot went berserk, which went how you'd expect it, considering it's a grot in a room full of orcs. The prisoner area was pretty much complete now, as we had taser turrets, which would work if they had a prisoner escape, but if they did have a berserk, it wouldn't be the greatest. So we now saw that our poor Nicole was not very happy at all. But we did have the new grot, which actually caused his head to completely disappear. So he is a new kind of being. But he did get beaten up again by the impid inside of the slave. So we decided that we were going to execute that new prisoner, as he was being a pain in the ass. And we also had a new med bot, which we bought from the traders that just came. And that would help us alleviate some of the consistent healing that Nicole has to do. And it also doesn't use medicine, which is great. It was now time for our new research, which we decided to go into deep drilling. And in the meantime, we had Randy, who gave us some rabid rabbits, which was great. And it was finally time to give our Nicole the ascension she needed, Ceramorphosis. As she had the tadpole in, she wouldn't be that happy, but she'd be a hell of a lot more happy when she's got it. And we finally started on our strip mine, because we were starting to run out of components and metals and all of the good stuff. But while Nicole was hauling some medicine, she actually went unconscious and fell asleep, knocked unconscious outside. And it was time for her new awakening. She was now part of the Illithids. Once Nicole had awoken, we actually started off on the throne room, which, again, like I said, was not going to be the greatest. And as soon as we started creating it, the Wasters were not happy, possibly because they didn't like we had captured an enslaved gator. So we set up ready to fight them all. There was loads and loads of these Wasters. However, they weren't that heavily armored, so what they kept doing is they kept running in, then running out for cover, which made them take loads and loads of damage. They actually held grenades as well, some tox grenades, which wasn't the greatest, as if they explode, then all of that gear is going to be stuck in a massive fume of fog, of toxic fog. As you can see, our wonderful little Holobots are happily reloading all of our turrets, and as they did, the Wasters decided to leave. which was probably smart because we had near endless amounts of ammo. But one of our holobots, actually our health bot, got hit by one of the trip mines that they set up. But however, it wasn't too bad as we started. I think this might actually be a holobot. It wasn't too bad as it was only a robot. I feel like if it was anything other than a robot, it would have lost a leg. Which, fortunately, I decided to actually go and grab those new holobots. We had a load of makeshift weaponry all around, as well as some melee weapons. All of these would probably be sold because we're already a lot more advanced than that. Although the revolver could be good, but we just don't have the colonists to deal with that. Overall, still a successful raid defense, which is perfect to increase our Illithid plans for the future. I started setting up some areas for where we're going to drop off all of the corpses, and I started unallowing some of the corpses as we did want to gain our new really strange creature. We had a orc go berserk, and I was hoping that the steel tasing turrets would work, but it turns out they only really work with the breakouts. We also had Mind Break, a new ability with the psionic link, and this actually works way better than the actual Origin of the Illithids mod, which is kind of weird, but it completely turned it into a colonist. So we gained a new colonist. I kind of wish that I'd put it on the grot, but shortly afterwards we did. And now we have the biggest grot and a gugs, or however you pronounce that. And our necromancer can get to work on raising some skeletal slaves. Another enraged prisoner decided to try and berserk out. Again, the turrets did not do anything, purely down to the fact that it was a berserk, a mental state, so he didn't recognize it. And we sent one of our colonists down with a sword this time, as we were fed up of trying to enslave them and just turn them into a mindless skeleton/zombie horde. We also had finished some research, as well as started to make some more bullets, as they were really good. But with our wealth skyrocketing, it was time for our first taste of Mechanoids. The first taste of Mechanoids in our series, which are by far my least favourite thing to deal with. So we set up a plan. We wanted to get all this plasteel because we wanted to get some new things, as these are plasteel walls, and all of our slaves, as well as Nicole, were set off on making our strip mine. But look at Nicole go in comparison to them. It was finally time to set up our lovely throne room, which we set off very quickly, but little did I know that the throne room would take forever. Winter was arriving, so we actually set straight into it, and we wanted to do it a second time. But while that was happening, another cluster of Mechanoids actually decided they wanted to start with us. So outside was a no-go. We set everybody to not going outside and tried to figure out a plan of what we wanted to do. Midway through, however, while we were all hiding in our homes, a demonic warp storm came out, which would hopefully waste all of the ammo inside of their turrets, which would hopefully allow us to go out and get rid of them. But for now, we were still unsafe. But now it's time to just enjoy some war between demons and Mechanoids. So, one thing that I did not realize is I had still let our holobots go out and do whatever they felt like, rather than keeping them in the home zone, which wasn't great because every single one of them got destroyed. So that was a load of components to go. But we finally finished the throne room, and in the meantime, we also had a load of traders who somehow managed to make it through the Mechanoids. They didn't even get attacked by the they got slightly attacked by the Mechanoids, so I was hoping that they would completely destroy them. And it looked like they had run out of ammo, so that was promising. So we were a little bit safer, as well as the Mechanoids that crashed in the original lot also ignored the traders on the way down. So I was rather confused in what was happening. So we set up a plan to go and raise some dead. We have raised the person who had a pump shotgun, and we were going to raise a little bit of a undead squad and send them off, as they could be revived, whereas our colonists, if they die, they lose a load of skills if we revive them. So here we go. Sam is off to fight the first Mechanoid cluster, which, well, the second Mechanoid cluster to fall, but the first Mechanoid cluster for us to fight. There is loads of purple bloodstains all around, as that's where the demons were, but it wasn't too difficult to deal with them. So the biggest grot actually raised some more undead in the area where we set up all the corpses, and we sent them off to go and fight this other Mechanoid cluster with a contaminator, or a pollution spreader, as that was going to really affect our crop yield if we didn't get rid of it. But again, I don't know if the Mechanoids may have a life area, so where they look for things that have a heat signature, as our zombies and skeletons do not really have a heat signature. So maybe that was it, but again, the traders were also not getting affected by these Mechanoids. So this was probably one of the easiest Mechanoid encounters I've ever had, especially since we had a new pump shotgun with some EMP rounds. We easily slaughtered all of the Mechanoids. With all of the threats gone, it was time to add someone to the throne room, although we couldn't, because there was no quest for us to actually gain a title, so nobody could use the actual meditation throne, which was basically a waste of resources at this moment in time. We also set up some areas to start smelting down the gear we did not want, and we saw a new area with specialized limbs, sleeving, and jump packs, all for a chance of 7 hives spawning in our area, which I think is worthwhile. We also had someone drop a pig person, fell from the sky with advanced heal. As we had no healer in our colony, we decided to go and capture him, but he had paralytic abrasion. So for the order of science, while he was in a paralytic state, we inserted a tadpole into his mind. We then accepted the quest, which they would give us a few squadrons of soldiers to help deal with our situation that they had just bestowed upon us, which they lured the bugs to us. So we now had several hives all to destroy, which hopefully would not overload the colony, right? This wasn't a mistake, was it? No, of course it wasn't. So we set everybody up to go into where all the turrets were. Unfortunately, there were a few stragglers behind them, so they were trapped between the bugs and their fellow colonists. We had all of these brand new squadrons with some decent weaponry to help deal with this. So this may actually be a breeze. Unfortunately, one of the servants, but fortunately it was only an undead servant, was stuck in hand-to-hand combat with our new friends, the bugs. But it wasn't too much of a problem, considering that they are undead. So we are completely slaughtering them. We have them down a wall, and we are just aiming to get rid of them all. Again, it didn't actually matter. So the quest giver said that they don't really care if they lose any of the soldiers. It won't cause any reputation fall or anything. So that was good. And all of the bugs were completely obliterated, and the only thing that fell was our undead. So that would literally be able to be placed onto a flat area to then re-raise, as undead is not the most difficult to regain. It was now time, after all of the bugs that had spewed everywhere had been killed, we were able to just start wiping out the hives one by one, which happened to be one of the easiest infestations I've ever dealt with. Even though we weren't that prepared, neither were the bugs apparently. There was no centipede or whatever they're called. And it was quite easy to just get rid of them. So we split off the squads to go and deal with different areas of the infestations. And we also decided to try and get Nicole to do something, but of course she is basically useless in this situation, so we just set everybody off, and everybody else was just doing their business in dealing with all of these hives, which these hives have given us an insane amount of money once we actually start slaughtering them all down. There is so much insect meat to sell in this area after we've butchered them all, and we can save some for ourselves, which we don't really need to, and we can also sell it, as we do need some new things. And shortly after that, it was all done and dusted. A thing I forgot to mention actually was Zephyr decided to go on a serum binge, which caused him to eat a load or drink a load of serums, which hopefully wouldn't cause him to turn into a monster, but he kind of already is a monster, so let's be real. And yeah, so all of our colonists barely got damaged, other than the undead that we'd previously raised for the Mechanoids went down. So probably the most successful hive infestation I have ever seen in Rimworld since I've been playing it. So like I said, now it was just time to start cleaning up all of the blood, all of the mess, and hopefully getting on our way. So that hospital was kind of invaluable, but here we have it. We have some tech prints for sleeving, specialized limbs, and jump pads. Let's just have a sink in of the aftermath of all these not so poor, evil, giant bugs that were in our colony. I also noticed that we can also raise animal corpses, which, imagine, undead insectoids. That would be insane. We also had used our science, and it turns out that paralytic abrasion still stays. So here we have some zombie insects. That is cool. Like, that is awesome. Unfortunately, we don't have the power inside of our necromancer to keep them alive. But here is our colony. Thank you for watching. I hope you have enjoyed, as this has been really different to create. And if this gets, say, 100 likes, then I will definitely be making another one of these again. But otherwise, I will be going back to my original schedule. Thank you all for watching. Peace.